Hello and welcome to the radiotimes.com Doctor Who podcast. My name's Hugh.
My name's Morgan.
And this week we're returning to a topic that we've briefly touched on before, the TV show Doctor Who. Yes, it's a surprise to everybody. No, I'm joking. No, I'm not joking because we are talking about Doctor Who. But what I mean is we're returning to the topic of a possible surprise regeneration coming to Doctor Who. So basically the story is this. For a while now, the rumour has stood that Jodie Whittaker is leaving Doctor Who. It's not been confirmed by the BBC. It's not been denied by the BBC. We're not sure if it's true. However, a lot of people do think it's true. And this kind of has led us to thinking whether they could do something quite interesting. I don't know whether, Morgan, I can sort of throw to you to sort of just lay out the groundwork a little, just so it's not me talking the whole time, for like kind of what's happening in Doctor Who right now. What are they doing right now?
Well, that I can answer, although I may throw back to you for some of the logistics because I feel like you have a better grasp on this than I do. But essentially, series 13 of Doctor Who is filming right now, and the supposition, I guess, is that Jodie Whittaker will be leaving at the end of this series, and the very specific the kind of the way in which this series falls, the way in which it's being filmed, all maybe contribute to the possibility that there could be a surprise regeneration, a secret regeneration. It's long been something that fans have campaigned for, this idea that we might not know who the next Doctor is before the moment of regeneration, and for various
out when
reasons.
The characters find out, basically.
Exactly, yeah, right. And it previously, for all kinds of logistical reasons, it seemed like an impossibility, or at least an improbability. But now it seems more than ever like it's something that Doctor Who could, if it wanted to, pull off, right?
Exactly, yeah. So as you said, the logistics of this are that it's something I thought about. Well, to be fair, I think I saw a couple of people speculating on Twitter about it first. I thought about it a bit, which is that it's filming at the moment, which is, that doesn't really suggest anything, but they have announced at the BBC that the series is going to air later this year. Specifically, I think it was suggested it was in the autumn. I think it said in the autumn. Yeah. So that's quite interesting because that would suggest that it's going to turn up maybe October, November sort of time, probably in a similar slot to Jodie Whittaker's first series, which started in October. It's a 10-month shoot. It kicked off at the beginning of November last year. That is sort of conservatively probably finish around August, September. So that's not that long before the series starts. It's not unheard of. It's what Doctor Who has done before. They've shot until pretty close before it. But the interesting thing about it is part of the reason that they always pre-announce the next Doctor is that people are going to find out, essentially, and they kind of want to control the narrative. It's like when Matt Smith was taking over from David Tennant, he was filming in the 10th Doctor's burnt-up costume before we'd seen the end of time. It wasn't going to be a big shock at that point, so they kind of needed to announce it to get ahead of the story. The way that things have been lined up for this series mean that if Jodie Whittaker is to regenerate at the end of this series, it will only have finished filming, a few months beforehand. They won't have started filming the next series, potentially the new Doctor, yet. So actually, the only thing this new Doctor will have needed to do is, come onto set, shoot one scene, which could be shot quite close to transmission as well. Lest we forget, they shot Jenna Coleman's cameo for Peter Capaldi's last episode very much later than everything else. And they shot Jodie's half of the regeneration after her announcement. They could get this new Doctor in, assuming there is a new Doctor again, in for just for one scene, the regeneration scene, very secret, and then spring it on us during the broadcast. And it does sound a bit mad, but it does sound like the sort of thing Chris Chibnall, who's the producer showrunner of Doctor Who, if people don't know that, would want to do, because we've had a surprise Doctor reveal before in Fugitive of Judoon. We've had a surprise Master reveal, and generally speaking, the Chris Chibnall era has been characterized by this sort of intense, quite professional level of secrecy that actually lends itself to big surprise cameos and twists, like John Barrowman turning up. That wasn't widely known before he turned up in Fugitive of Judoon, and obviously the Joe Martin Doctor. Whereas Johnson being the Master in the David Tennant years, people knew that was going to happen before that came along. Sacha Dhawan being the Master was actually a surprise. You know, so I mean, obviously they have done with Michelle Gomez. They did manage to kind of keep it a secret, but everyone kind of knew. But yeah, I guess my point is that it seems it's possible, and if they could do it, I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't do it, or at least try to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think again, going back to that word logistically, like it does seem more feasible that they could do it now more than ever, you know, for all the reasons you pointed out in terms of broadcast, and you wouldn't see a new actor wearing the old Doctor's clothes on location, so that all tracks. Regeneration scenes invariably happen on the TARDIS set. Not to say it would this time, but generally that seems to be the way that happens. So it's not like you're shooting on location. So again, if you wanted to bring in this actor under cover of darkness, this new Doctor, you could potentially do that. Shooting under COVID restrictions, again, like that's potentially a way in which it would be easier to kind of keep a closed set and have fewer cast members and crew members.
Yeah, and you
on
wouldn't
set
you
at that
wouldn't be
time.
having like, you know, looky loos wandering around the edge of
Yeah,
the set in the same way that you would during normal filming. Like it would be, not that you would necessarily have that if it was in studio anyway, but you know, you'd have fewer people around basically.
yeah, and not only because it's all very well to say you could do it, but also ultimately you want to think, is this a good idea? You know, there's lots of things that fans think would be fun, but would they actually happen? Would they actually benefit the show? You know, I'd love a Paul McGann miniseries, but I don't think it's probably going to happen. Big Finish notwithstanding. But actually, I do think there would be a lot of benefits creatively to doing this. Yeah, we've seen lots of different methods of revealing the new Doctor over the years, which I know we've talked about before, and they've had, I think it's fair to say, varying degrees of success. Where you had the special episode of Doctor Who Confidential, which revealed Matt Smith. You had the slightly painful live show, which revealed Peter Capaldi. And then you had Jodie had her specially shot scene, which was great, but was awkwardly inserted into the middle of a sporting event, much like the Bill Potts Pearl Mackie reveal. And then you sort of cut back to a slightly awkward-looking Gary Lineker being like, "Oh, and Jodie Whittaker is the new Doctor." It's all very, very, very strange. So I think, you know, if you were to do it this way, if you were to unmask the new Doctor, if you like, in an episode, for one thing, if you well, I guess it would depend how you approached it. If you kept it a complete surprise in terms of you didn't even mention that there was a regeneration coming or confirm that there's a regeneration coming, that's one approach. But if you were to say, look, this is Jodie Whittaker's final episode, she will regenerate, but we're not going to tell you who the new Doctor is until it airs, you're guaranteed, right, huge ratings for that episode. Everyone's going to tune in live.
Massive interest. Like you'd be on the front cover of the newspapers the next day. Like that's just big interest. And it does sort of make me think of all the times that Doctor Who has kind of done fake outs. Like, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the Chris Chibnall era is definitely playing off the Russell T Davies era in a lot of ways. Like it's clearly like Chris admires what Russell did, I think, quite a lot, and sort of tries to push back to that. And you've got to think, when David Tennant regenerates at the end of The Stolen Earth, that was on the news. You know, that was on like a news item. It was like huge, even though we knew it wasn't going to be a real regeneration, or at least a lot of us kind of worked out, but it wasn't going to be a real regeneration. It was still huge. And then they kind of had a fun way of doing with it. And then during the Peter Capaldi years, there was that one series. I think it was. There were very, like his last two series, actually, there were frequent regeneration fake outs where like you see his hands glowing, and you saw him like, I think in his last series, in The Lie of the Land, he fake regenerates once for no reason, because Bill doesn't know what that looks like. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that again. And then also they do it at the end of, or the beginning of, is it World Enough and Time? Or was it the Doctor Falls?
No, it's the Doctor Falls, where he starts to regenerate, but puts it off in order to have Twice Upon a Time happen.
Isn't it? Yeah, but he also, I think he starts to regenerate at the start of the episode, and then they do a flashback or something. And then
you're right.
Yeah, I think that might have been in World Enough and Time. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, anyway, so they did that, and then obviously he did eventually regenerate after sort of putting it off, like me doing the cleaning for quite a while. So I feel like actually doing it after all this kind of teasing and sort of playing around with the idea, like, because when we're watching those, it's exciting, but we're like, well, we know Peter Capaldi's not going to regenerate in his series. We know when he's going to regenerate. It's later. With this, it's like, well, maybe Jodie Whittaker is going to regenerate. Also, you know, shock, surprise, twist. What if we're all wrong about this, and this is the whole game plan. What if the idea is to make us think she might regenerate, to give real stakes to a story, and then surprisingly she doesn't. I mean, it's like Christmas special.
Psych. Yeah.
I mean, that could happen.
No, but it could happen. But let's say that this is something that they're looking at seriously. I think again, creatively, it's quite smart, because you mentioned one of the reasons it could happen, again logistically, is because they haven't started shooting the next series. They won't have started shooting the next series by the time this series goes out. So series 14, we don't know exactly, but it could potentially be quite some way off. If that were to be the case, it would actually be great for Doctor Who to have a fresh wave of publicity after the series is done airing, right? You could have it that the new Doctor is revealed in the episode. The BBC puts out a press release after the episode with quotes from the actor. Yes, it's me. I'm delighted to be the new Doctor Who. They then do a whole ton of interviews post episode. So if the final episode, like we said, if the final episode goes out, the new Doctor's revealed, Doctor Who's back in the headlines, it's a hot topic of conversation, just as the show potentially might go off the air then for an extended period, and it will keep it in the public consciousness, rather than the series ending and then the conversation's over. It's no, this is only the beginning of the conversation, because we've just revealed the new Doctor, and it's a jumping off point for after that final episode.
And also, that's the point in Doctor Who kind of news cycle terms, when everything's kind of heating up. It's like every little bit of information you can get becomes a big deal. It's like, oh, here's the first look at the new costume. And it's like, oh, first shot of this person filming. Oh, we've heard that the new Doctor's going to meet the censorites, like it's all stuff like that. Like every little thing that wouldn't be that exciting as like continuing Doctor. There's a shot of her filming. Fair enough. That wouldn't be that interesting. With a new Doctor, it kind of has all this extra meaning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like the great thing about a new Doctor is that everything old is new again, right? So,
yes.
Another Dalek story. Always exciting to have the Daleks back, but it's just another Dalek story. Whereas there's something exciting about the first time that a new Doctor meets the Daleks, or a new Doctor meets the Master, or a new Doctor meets the Cybermen. I just think it would be a really great way to kind of keep, as I say, the show in the public consciousness, in the public discourse. If Doctor Who goes off the air for a little while after series 13, which we don't know in terms of production, what's going to happen next. COVID could mean there's a potentially longer break between 13 and 14. I think that would be a really great way.
In every sense of the words, Doctor 13 and Doctor 14, series 13 and series 14.
It works really nicely that way. So it would be a great way to kind of keep the show in the public consciousness during that break.
Definitely. And I think as well, like, it's just a cool thing to do. You know what I mean? And it's kind of, it's hard to think, what's a new way to do regeneration, right? What's the kind of interesting thing to do? And I feel like when Chris Chibnall first came in, the interesting thing to do was to make the Doctor a woman, in a way. Like, that's not the only reason he did it, but that was like a way to kind of reboot the show and kind of be, and interesting and, fresh. And I think, like, going ahead, it's like, what's the really interesting thing to do? It's like, well, what else is something the show's never done with regeneration? Actually presenting it as it is for the characters. We don't know who the new Doctor is going to be until they arrive. It's something that fans have wanted for ages. It's something that's easy to imagine Chris Chibnall as a fan would have wanted. Do you know what I mean? Once upon a time. I can imagine like that being something that would appeal to his sensibility. I mean, this could all be absolute rubbish, obviously, but it does just seem like it's a new thing for Doctor Who to do, and it's getting harder for Doctor Who to do new things. Like we've seen the glowing regeneration, the sort of heartfelt goodbyes. It's kind of like, what are you going to do to kind of make it fresh? And I do feel like it's interesting that you brought up the Jodie Whittaker Wimbledon announcement thing, because that kind of did make me think they did that. The current production team, or some of them did do that. They pulled it off under intense secrecy. Obviously, a much smaller production, but they didn't really have the full weight of Doctor Who production behind them yet, and they were kind of learning the ropes. With kind of all the experience now, I'm like, would they want to kind of up themselves? Would they want to kind of top themselves at their own game by actually filming a full regeneration scene secretly, and also knowing how much press attention they got and how much like interest there was in the kind of live TV event thing of the Jodie Whittaker reveal? Would they not want to kind of do that again, but even more so? Like, it would just be a very, very cool thing to do. Part of the thing that also interests me about this is, as I said to you before we started recording, they haven't confirmed or denied the Jodie Whittaker thing yet. And that is interesting, because I kind of thought after that news came out, we're either going to hear this isn't the case, kind of, by hook or by crook, or
Mm.
we would hear, yes, it's official, I'm leaving Doctor Who, but here I am telling it in my own terms, which is kind of what happened with Peter Capaldi. Like, we kind of had an idea that he might be leaving for a while, and then he came out on the radio, like, it was well over a year before he actually left. It was January, I think it was anyway, or maybe it was the year he left. I can't really remember. It was January anyway, and he basically said, "Yes, I'm leaving." Da, da, da. And I was kind of thinking, are we going to get that? We haven't had that, and that has made me think a couple of things. One thing is, like I said before, that actually this isn't real, but they think it's fun to kind of string us along and make us
Keep
feel
us on
like
the hook.
keep us on the hook and make us think maybe there will be a regeneration. That said, previously when there's been rumors of Jodie leaving the series, they have explicitly said, no, that's not happening. We had, I won't name names, but somebody quoted one of our own stories erroneously recently, saying that had happened again, but it hadn't. It was an old story. But like I said previously, there was these rumors that Jodie was leaving, and the BBC kind of said, no, that's not happening. That's not true. So, there is a bit of a precedent there for them to say it. In which case, the other option is maybe they haven't really answered it because they think, probably not entirely incorrectly, the story has been big, but maybe it won't have percolated through beyond the sort of people who follow these things. Some people in the general public will know it, but not everybody. It hasn't been absolutely everywhere. It was one newspaper's story. Not everywhere picked it up. A lot of places picked it up, but it hasn't been like officially confirmed. And maybe their original plan was they're not even going to announce that Jodie's leaving. You're going to be watching the series and watching the episode. You think, oh yeah, the usual peril. And then it's like, dun, 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 the Doctor regenerates, and the Doctor actually regenerates. What would be such a TV moment? That said, you would lose all the advantages we talked about with getting people excited and watching the episode. So
yeah, that's the thing. It does depend on how you want to do it. I think if you were to pre-announce that it's, as I said, if you were to pre-announce it's Jodie's last episode, but not reveal who the new Doctor is, and that tends to be generally the thing that fans push for. It's not so much when we say a secret regeneration, they're mostly thinking it would be cool if we didn't know who the Doctor was, who the new Doctor was before that moment of regeneration. But you're right in that there's another layer to this, that they could keep the Doctor's final episode, the fact that it's the final episode, a total secret, which would be absolutely mad. And it would be like that moment in The Stolen Earth where David Tennant, in quotes, regenerates, but multiplied by 1,000 because it's actually happening. And I think, again, like, maybe it wouldn't be the best idea in terms of the publicity, but I think in terms of storytelling, it would be amazing. In terms of the experience of watching that episode, it would be like, again, it would be like something like watching something like the Caves of Androzani, where there's a kind of building sense of dread, and that the Doctor is heading towards regeneration, but with that kind of oh my god, is this actually happening? Is this the final? What they haven't announced this? This is crazy. Like, I think it would be. I mean, maybe invalidated now by the fact that, like, at least in some quarters,
we've ruined it, Morgan. We've ruined it.
Yeah, just us. But I do think, like, if they were ever able to pull that off, it would be really, really interesting. Although I do remember, it makes me think of something Stephen Moffat said once in terms of, like, what fans do and don't consider a spoiler. Like, is announcing that a Doctor is leaving a spoiler? And people were apparently quite aggrieved that Stephen Moffat had announced that Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill were leaving Doctor Who because it was a spoiler for the fact that Amy and Rory were leaving. And his response was, well, you kind of have to do that because you have to make it clear that those actors are available for other work. Like, they have to say they're leaving so that their agent can start putting them up for other jobs. So maybe, again, practically, maybe keeping a Doctor's departure secret isn't as achievable as keeping a new Doctor's arrival secret. But I do think it would be interesting. Like, I'm sure you remember the press screening for Twice Upon a Time. They played us out the episode, but only up to the point that Peter Capaldi regenerated, and we didn't get to see the Jodie scene. We had to see it that first scene along with
we saw her
else,
eyes, didn't we? We saw her eyes for a second.
Yeah, you saw that moment of Peter Capaldi's eyes shifting into Jodie Whittaker's, but you didn't see anything beyond that. And although that was exciting that, we have to wait for that scene, you kind of, like, these scenes tend to follow something of a formula. She's going to say something a bit crazy, and then the TARDIS will probably explode or crash land, and then it'll be left on a cliffhanger. You kind of know how these things will go. But imagine if it was the same setup, except you didn't know who the Doctor was going to be. Like, it would be ramped up. The anticipation would be ramped up so much more.
Definitely. I think it'd be really cool. My other thing is that this does slightly remind me of, on a slight tangent, is it reminds me a little of when Jenna Coleman was rumored to be leaving for ages, and she kind of played up to it in the press, and then she didn't leave, and that was almost a surprise. And then we later found out that she was going to leave and then changed her mind, but then they rewrote the script at the last minute, essentially. So she had her ending, and then they also put in a bit where it's like, psych, no, I'm not leaving. So there is a bit of me that's like, it could be that there's some truth in this, and then it turns out not to be, and it might just be a case of like Jodie wanting to leave, wanting not to leave, changing her mind or whatever. But that said, it does feel a little bit different, and it is obviously different when a doctor's leaving, when a companion's leaving. And I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like if this wasn't true, we'd probably have heard a more emphatic denial if there wasn't an element of truth in it. And as for this regeneration thing, I'm just like, I don't know, seeing what they've pulled off recently in the series, I feel like they might be able to pull this off. Because I know some people have like criticisms of this era of Doctor Who and everything, but I don't think anyone could say they're not good at pulling these sort of twists off. They've done it like 2 or 3 times now, just in the last series, and they've all been pretty big moments. And I think, yeah, I reckon they could do it, and I think it'd be cool.
And well, there's definitely a balance to strike, isn't there? There's a debate to be had around what level of secrecy is good for Doctor Who, and I'd say arguably, Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat were less secretive in the sense of, they would give away episode titles quite early to Doctor Who magazine and that type of thing. And I know, again, there was some criticism from fans early on in the Chris Chibnall era that like it seemed like with series 11 in particular, like everything was a secret.
Series 11 was tough. That was tough to write about.
Yeah, which in retrospect was maybe a slightly odd decision, given that there wasn't really anything to there was nothing to conceal, really. Whereas but that really like staunch commitment to secrecy has done well for Chris Chibnall, in the sense of like, when there is stuff to hide, he's really good at hiding it, whether it be Sacha Dhawan as the Master, or John Barrowman's return, or Joe Martin being revealed as the fugitive Doctor. Like, he's really, really good at keeping those secrets. Something that I did think, though, when I was thinking about this idea of the surprise new Doctor and not revealing who the Doctor is prior to the regeneration scene, for that to work, do you think it has to be someone vaguely recognizable as the new Doctor? Because what you don't want, like, it's kind of exciting anyway that it's the new Doctor, we've met the new Doctor, but I guess the potential for it to backfire is that the new Doctor appears and everyone goes, who's that? Like,
that's true. I hadn't really thought of that, actually. I hadn't thought about, I guess, the visual, if they're like strikingly different to Jodie Whittaker in some way, I feel like that's the thing. If it was like Michael Sheen, I feel like that would be like, what?
Yeah, but also if you reveal that the Doctor's going to regenerate, but you don't reveal who the new Doctor is, more so than ever, you're going to get these like this crazy level of anticipation, which is good, but is also could potentially backfire if everyone's going, come on Ben Whishaw, and then it regenerates into, and then the new Doctor appears, and it's, as we've speculated in recent episodes, it's a noted character actor with no one defining role who is not yet quite a household name. It could be slightly underwhelming. I mean, obviously you have the kind of, you'd probably have a caption afterwards and introducing X as the Doctor. So then everyone would go and Google who the actor is if they're not immediately a kind of a familiar face. But I do feel like it has the potential to underwhelm slightly. It has, or at least it has the potential to kind of build up that anticipation to a level that's impossible to meet that level of expectation, because people will be tuning in, praying for their number one pick for the Doctor. And then it will be like, I don't know, could it be, it, as exciting as it is, it then could potentially be deflating if it's not who you were hoping for. It's an interesting one.
It's a tricky one. I guess part of me is like, I think people will be excited no matter what. Like, it's a little like, I guess it's a little like The Masked Singer, which we've talked about before, where it's like, there's an extent to which you want it to be someone, you want the mask to come off and it to be someone really exciting and unexpected. But also you quite like it if your guess is right.
No, 100%. And I can't believe we're making this comparison, but it is a surprisingly good one. When you're watching The Masked Singer and Robin takes his mask off and it's Aston, and everyone knew it was Aston Marigold from JLS for weeks and weeks and weeks, somehow it's still fun. Like, you say, it's like my suspicions confirmed. So to get back to Doctor Who, maybe it would work anyway, just because the moment of regeneration is so exciting. Jodie's Doctor turning into a new Doctor, no matter who that new Doctor is, if they'd kept it secret, you just didn't know what to expect. It's still kind of fun and exciting when there's a new Doctor at the helm of the TARDIS.
Definitely. Like I say, I feel like if it's someone who's different and they give them like a really cool thing to like say or do in the first scene, like it's difficult as the thing. It could be a bit of a like flat moment. You're right, which isn't something I'd really thought about in this discussion. But I'm also like, if you pulled it off properly, you could do it really well. And who knows, like I've heard, rumors and suggestions. I don't know if there's anything in them. I'm always going back to the rumor mill in this podcast these days. So I should say, I don't know what's in these rumor milled products. But there was a sort of thing floating around for a while that the BBC was considering having a kind of brief tenured doctor, like having someone very famous play the role for like a mini series and then regenerating again into like the next proper doctor. And Michael Sheen was actually, that's the reason I said that name. He was one of the people I heard connected to it. And so part of me is like, if you were trying to do this secret regeneration thing and you wanted to have that big buzzy moment, you could do a stunt casting for like that and then for like a couple of specials afterwards, which might also help with production, and then do a more normal regeneration again. I'm just a bit like, you kind of can't regenerate all the time. You can't just make it constantly. Here's a new doctor, here's a new doctor, here's a new doctor. I mean, it feels like we've barely, gotten to know Jodie, and apparently she's possibly leaving. I mean, we've talked before about how she has actually done fewer episodes than most other doctors. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of torn because, like I said before, I never like the stunt casting idea. I never think it's a big name. But part of me is like, wouldn't it be really cool like that? When John Hurt is the doctor at the end of the name of the doctor, it's like, that's a really cool reveal. And if it was, Brian Connolly or someone, I don't know why I went for Brian Connolly there. But if it was, and maybe that's not, maybe that's a bad example. If it was like, Timothy West, it would be like, all right. It's just sort of like, oh yeah, I know him a bit. It's like it's not quite the same impact as it being John Hurt. I mean, we also kind of knew John Hurt was going to do that at that point, but I feel like there is a bit of me that's like, God, wouldn't it be cool if it was someone really like well known, and you're like, oh my God, it's so and so. Whereas you do run the risk of it being like, and I do feel like we mentioned the Pearl Mackie reveal earlier. I do think there was a little bit of, I mean, her name kind of leaked to some of the press slightly before that. So I think people were a bit prepared for her to be there. But generally speaking, with her and Matt Smith, there was a bit of a risk of like, who? Anyway, for those announcements. So I guess maybe it doesn't really matter. Like if you think of it as just another way of announcing it, whether you're doing it in the drama or whether you're doing it, in the middle of a football or tennis game, or you're doing it like, primetime TV, countdown, who's it going to be? I guess it's all the same thing, right? It's all the same risk. It's just like, it's just where you present it.
Yeah, and I think there are risks, like you say, however you do it, but there are also real benefits, as we've touched on, to doing it this way. Because as I was saying earlier, I do feel like, particularly with the new series of Doctor Who, as in post 2005, the regeneration scenes have fit more of a formula. They tend to take place within the TARDIS. There tends to be a big emotional speech. The Doctor regenerates and then says, "Body parts. I've got new body parts." And then the TARDIS explodes and crash lands. And that tends to be how these play out. There's the danger that those scenes could start to become a bit writ and a bit formulaic. So actually, this would be a really great way to mix things up.
Definitely. I mean, I'm keen on it as an idea. If we're completely wrong, then it's still a fun idea because someone else could do it in the future. Copyright us. Someone else can give us the cash and then get on with it. I think it would be very cool. I don't. But what do you think, listeners at home? Would you like to see a surprise regeneration like this? Would you like to meet the next Doctor in media res, if that's the right way of expressing that? Or do you think it's fun to kind of do a proper big announcement beforehand? And also, is it a good idea to be holding the identity of the new Doctor back, assuming there is a new Doctor, when it might get leaked and then all the best laid plans of Mice and Men would go awry? Let us know in the comments below. You can listen to our podcast here on YouTube, which is probably where you're listening to it, or you can listen to it on things like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Acast, things like that. It's everywhere. I think it's everywhere. It's pretty much everywhere. We'll be back next week talking about more Doctor Who stuff. I know, surprise, surprise. Until then, thanks for listening. I've been Hugh.
I've been Morgan.
And neither of us has been the surprise regeneration of the next Doctor. Goodbye.